Evacuation procedure. Fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and not the lifts. And once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by this door through which you came in, indicated by the green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please make sure all mobile phones are turned off or set to silent, and I would advise you that all or part of the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast by the council, but you may also find yourself filmed by other members of the public or the council from the back of the room. Second item is apologies, and all the cabinets are here, so there's no apologies. Third item, declarations of interest. Do we have any to add to these that are listed? Thank you. Fourth item is minutes. Confirm the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 24th of January. For those agreed as the record. And then item 5 is public consultation, which, because there are people wanting to speak about various items, I will take public consultation as and when we come to those items. So, item 6 is development and acquisition strategy, housing and communities. Councillor Jackson.
The development and acquisition strategy for the housing revenue account sets out the framework that will be used to both build and acquire new homes. The strategy is attached to Appendix A and details how we will determine which new build schemes to proceed with and how we will determine which properties to purchase. It is important to demonstrate that we are delivering value for money, and the section entitled Determining Viability details the methods that will be used to ensure all schemes achieve a payback of the investment made within the relevant timeframes. The recommendations are at 2.1 of the main report that the strategy be adopted, and I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we have two speakers on this, Councillor Kondaka and Michelle Kondaka. So first can I ask Councillor Kondaka, please.
Thank you, Chair. In spite of what some election leaflets may have you believe, all the parties in Nuneaton and Bedworth are actually keen on getting more council housing. It's really important we actually get housing for the people who can't afford to buy, people who probably can't afford market rents, and we have some very good council housing. But we're losing it due to the right to buy, and we have some empty council housing due to difficult to let ones. These things aren't all the council's fault, but the council also isn't doing as good a job as it can. I will ask a question later about the warden's flats that have been sitting empty for a year, but coming to our new build, we need a good amount built quickly. It was very nice to see a pilot where we built, I think it's 46 or something, but they were quite expensive and it took quite a long while. And the report says this was a learning exercise, effectively. This was to test out the process. And I really hope we can actually go and build a reasonable number every year and maybe not gold plate them so we actually get them in at a slightly lower cost, but actually get a slightly higher number. In this bit, the report, it talks about partnerships and innovation, but it talks about the strategic housing market assessment, which is on page 23, where it makes a false claim that we're short of 502 affordable homes per year. There's no such number. The number 502 comes from the Borough Council's aspiration for all the housing it wanted to build going into the borough plan. The actual basis of our need is 328 a year for all housing. Because housing wasn't affordable and house prices are so high, the government's expectation is to build 420 houses a year. So 502 affordable per year is a crazy figure. The issue we have is not how many houses we have, it's how many people can afford housing. And we need to actually look at the people who are there, they just count rent, or they're sofa surfing. We haven't got an issue with the quantity as much as the availability at a price people can pay. And it really disturbs me that the council is not helping people, and the cuts to things like employment advice rights. We're not getting it. If we make our population poorer, it will not be able to afford the housing we already got. We have housing. There's 1,600 empty homes in the borough. Builders will build more houses if there's more rich people moving into Wellington. But the issue is how many affordable houses we have. And I say we need to get them affordable, we need to build them sensibly. I mean, the ones at Park Lane are absolutely superb. People have raved about how good they are, but maybe they're too good. We should have actually built slightly more at a slightly more sensible spec. And this is part of the learning exercise. So, yeah, I wish the programme well. Take on board my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to Councillor Kondaka?
Yes, Chair. Can I ask Councillor Kondaka if he's aware of the second pilot which is being undertaken?
I'm only
It was agreed by Cabinet some while ago.
I'm only aware that you approved to go ahead with a second pilot. We haven't, as members, been briefed with any details.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you very much. Michelle Kondaka.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add in a couple of bits from what Keith's already said. Yes, we do need more council housing, and we do need the ones that are truly affordable. All this new build that's been going on all around, particularly our side of town, they're not affordable. Even the so-called affordable houses aren't really affordable for a lot of people. In terms of purchasing and things, I just want to sort of emphasise how important it is to have a really good risk assessment. At the moment, the market is actually, quite high. It might stay high, it might crash and things. When I first, qualified and when I first bought a house and things, the market did crash and I did lose out, quite a bit. So, yes, interest rates are low and what have you and things, but it's very important to look at it the long term. But I was a bit alarmed to see that the payback period was considered at 50 years, because to me that doesn't seem a very real world figure, and I think there should be payback in a much shorter period of time. I couldn't find anything in the paperwork about being able to not have the right to buy, because if a lot of the problems with lack of council housing across the country is because of the right to buy and then them not being replaced and things. But I couldn't see anything in the paperwork that said that any new builds or new acquisitions, then the people taking those on wouldn't be allowed to in time buy them, because I think that is quite important. That is in the contract. I hope that you can do that. Also, there was a lot, you talked about new builds and things. I presume that any new builds that would take place would be in areas already allocated to housing in the borough plan, or the sites like on Queen's Road that people constantly say to me, what's happening about those? I know the council doesn't own the land, but they've been, as long as I've lived in Nuneaton and things, they've been just like bomb sites, and it's just such a shame that those aren't being brought into use. And I'm sure there must be some way that the council can push, and if you are going to do new builds, do it in those areas which would really improve that area, and those areas are really close to town and all the amenities as well, so that from a sustainability point of view that would be excellent as well. I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you very much. Back to the Cabinet then. Can I just say, as council leader and the leader of the Labour group on the council for a number of years. I've been very proud of this council's record in council housing. I actually think we're second to none in terms of council housing. I also think that that's been recognised by our tenants in previously voting not to go into arm's length management, but to stay with this council. And I think our new houses that we have managed to build during the time when it was extremely difficult to build council houses are a credit to not only to the council but to the officers and all the people who worked very hard to get that scheme underway. I have to say that no house is too good to be a council house, that we expect everybody to have decent standards. When I was a child, I lived in a council house which was built to Parker Morris standards after the war. Those were very quickly dropped by Mrs. Thatcher as being too good. Luckily, we have got some of that back, but not to the extent that we would like. And what we want is for everybody to live in a decent home and to be able to get a decent home very quickly. Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, just to say, I think this strategy will actually enable us to work in a far more strategic way, not just building new houses, which we are committed to doing, but also in acquiring appropriate properties to add to the council stock. I do recommend it, and trust Cabinet will vote for something that will set us in good stead to continue to provide high quality housing for the tenants of this borough. And I would echo your comments, Leader, that there's no such thing as too good a council house.
Is that seconded? Yes. All those in favour then of that report? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 7 then, HRA Budget and Capital Programme. I'm going to come to Councillor Jackson on that.
Yes, Chair, this sets out, the recommendations are at section 2 of the report, and this sets out our budget going forward, taking full account of both the risks of the housing revenue account, which are quite extreme actually. We still have no clarity from government on many of its policies, particularly in relation to the cost of the housing revenue account of the sale of higher value voids, something that they seem to know about, but they're not giving us any information about when they're going to actually come forward with this requirement. Something that will make us sell our higher value houses. We currently have a loan to actually buy them back from the government, but they are insisting we're going to sell them to enable housing associations to fund right to buy, something I'm completely opposed to. And additionally, Chair, we are carrying out a stock condition survey at the moment, which will enable us to know exactly what we need to invest in terms of capital improvements to our existing stock. It still has plenty of money to continue the new build programme that we want to do, Chair. It will be an item going to Council this evening, Chair, and I'm very glad happy to say that I will recommend all of those recommendations at section 2.
Thank you. Two speakers again, Councillor Kondaka and Michelle Kondaka. Councillor Kondaka.
Thank you, Chair. I particularly want to talk about the Capital Programme Appendix. It's Appendix A on page 40. I don't mean 40, I mean B, page 42. The Council's doing a lot of good stuff with council housing. We had some very good refurbishment of the flats at Carisbrook Ride Avenue. And I hope in the line here it talks about £900,000 for cladding, that some of that is that type of work applied to places like Cleaver Gardens. Because that work did make a lot of difference to those flats and was very beneficial to their dampness and their running costs, etc. So that's really good. On the negative side, we keep pushing back things like refurbishing of empty voids, and I'll be asking Councillor Jackson about this at the full council, because they're a massive asset that unfortunately wasn't suitable for renting out. And so this adaptation work, which we had £250,000 in the budget for, and the warden's flats, which have been sitting empty for about a year since we lost our sheltered housing unit, really should have been brought back into use earlier. Being more parochial on my Cleaver Gardens area, there's shelters for the scooters, the buggies that the old people use. Really, really vital to them as they get older. A lot of them are actually in very good health, apart from their ability to obviously walk any distance, and obviously there's not a bus service or anything to clean the gardens. So the work that they're promised to get some scooter housing really needs to be brought forward. You know, we've got budget for it, but it just keeps getting pushed back, this idea. So I do hope that progresses. I say the council housing stuff is actually one of the things we do better. I criticise the council an awful lot. I'm a good critical friend, but actually a lot of the stuff we are doing on the housing side is actually very beneficial. And a lot of the stuff we did a couple of years ago in terms of having the handyman that comes around on walkabouts to actually get a lot of the cheap jobs done on the day or the next day is really good. But the walkabout schemes is starting to fail. You know, they're not being notified to councillors, and that's a good way of picking up a lot of maintenance, which will actually get us things solved early, rather than going years and years and years and then being a structural problem. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions, Councillor Condell? No, thank you very much. Michelle Condell.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise one thing actually. That was it's in the sort of table thing on 3.2 on page 30. There I was just sort of a little bit alarmed that there was this amount of reduced spend across repairs and maintenance. I mean, it explains a little bit about due to procurement savings, but the fact that it's vacancies, it does concern me that, you know, we've not got the staff to keep things going, because there's also vacancies across the service further down, excluding repairs and maintenance, of £270,000. So I don't know, but I'm just asking a question, and maybe you can answer it, you know, very simply. Does this just mean that people who are paying, you know, living in council accommodation, paying their rents and things, are they not getting the service that they paid for? Are things not getting done because there are vacancies that are not, you know, being covered? I don't know. But that's, you know, what I wanted to really sort of highlight.
Thank you. Any questions to Michelle Condalka? No, thank you very much. Back to you then, Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I think there's an awful lot that's going on very well in housing, particularly in terms of what are very significant savings in procurement, something I would hope all councillors would join me in celebrating. It's always good if you can spend less and do the same quality and the same level of service. We have our residents' partnership, who actually assist with the awarding of contracts and making sure that services are fit and are good for our tenants. Chair, I think this budget represents a prudent, sensible approach to setting the housing revenue account that will see it survive in the longer term and actually provide new houses, good services, and continue to improve thermal insulation of our properties, make sure they're fit, safe, and meeting the decent home standards. Chair, I've every pleasure in moving the recommendation.
Seconded. Thank you. Any, all those in favour then? Thank you very much. Item 8, the General Fund Budget and Capital Programme 2018-19. The report presents the draft General Fund Revenue Budget and Capital Programme for 2018-19 along with a forecast outturn position for this financial year. Section 3 shows the forecast outturn in the current financial year, which is an additional contribution to reserves of 123,000, largely as a result of increased planning. The other key variances that make up this underspend are given at Appendix A, and these will be closely monitored for the remainder of the year. The current draft budget position for 2018-19 is shown at Section 5. This is a deficit of 287,000 after taking into account savings that have already been identified and approved by Cabinet in November, as well as further savings in Table 5.5 that are being proposed. The next section considers the options available and the actions required to ensure that a balanced budget for 2018-19 can be recommended to the Council. This includes a decision on any increase in council tax and fees and charges. The 3-year financial plan has been updated and this is shown at section 8. This gives an overview of the issues facing the Council in the medium term and the further government funding reductions that are planned as part of the final year of the local government finance settlement in 2019-20. The estimated savings required to 2020-21 are in the region of 1.7 million. Future funding is extremely uncertain due to the government's fair funding review and move to 75% business rates retention from 2020-21. Section 9 shows the proposed capital programme for 2018-19 and the resources available to finance it. The programme will be 12.967 million and full details are shown on Appendix A. A risk assessment of the assumptions built into the 2018-19 budget is included at Section 10. The localisation of business rates continues to present significant additional risk to the authority, and this must be reflected in the level of reserves that are maintained. A review of the reserves that the Council maintains has been carried out as part of the budget setting process, and a summary of these is shown earlier in the report at Section 7. The recommendations are shown at Section 2 of the report. I have a variety of speakers on this. I've got 6, and the first one is Kyle Evans.
Thank you very much, Chair. The budget put forward this evening from the Labour administration is, to put it mildly, a budget that invests in a record of failure. And I think it's clearly evident, just from looking at this budget this afternoon, that this administration is outdated and clearly lacks a sense of vision for the future of our borough. The administration is still fascinated with wasting money on the climbing tower. And residents outside this town hall are playing spot the tower because it's never seen. As Councillor Conticore pointed out at the last full council meeting, it's costing the taxpayer £42 a climb. Why not scrap the tower completely, sell it off and reinvest those savings in recreating the play rated scheme, a service which will show people that this council takes children seriously. Tonight we also see a cut of over £32,000 to the Warwickshire Employment Advice Rights Service. This cut will hurt the most vulnerable residents across the borough. In quarters 1 and 2, between 2017 to 2018, 323 people used the service in the leader's own ward in Camp Hill. Just under 300 in Bedworth, Barpool 131, Abbey 148, Wembrook 189. Local residents will suffer if you decide to go forward with this tonight. Could I suggest selling off the climbing wall and getting rid of the In Touch magazine before removing their funding? The cut of funding to the Bulkington Village Centre also concerns me. The loss of over £4,000, it's not over, it's £4,000, will see the service lose 2/3 of its funding from the council overnight. I will, however, give credit where due, and I do to some extent agree with some of the proposed cuts. For example, getting rid of trade union officials, reducing town hall floral displays, savings within the mayoralty, reductions in the town twinning budget, to name a few. I like the idea of reducing the number of In Touch magazines, but I would ask the Labour group to consider amending the budget to include scrapping all the In Touch magazine publications and to look at creating an online magazine, or at least get officers to look into funding the In Touch magazine through means of putting adverts in each edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any questions, Mr. Evans? Thank you very much. The second speaker is Daniel Lomax.
Right, I don't think this will take a few minutes, so I'll just start by reminding you of the aims and priorities that you listed at the beginning of your cabinet meetings. Aim for priority 1 is to provide quality services which represent value for money. Aim 1, Priority 1, is to improve the quality of life and social justice for residents so that it's much closer to that enjoyed by the rest of Warwickshire. And with that in mind, I think it's worth bearing in mind what a high rate of applications, what a high rate of incidents our advice rights service deals with. And priority 2 is to create a healthy, diverse, robust economy which provides employment opportunities for local people. Obviously, advice rights have a very good record of getting people into work or back into work, including volunteers. It's the first port of call locally for all sorts of employment issues. Councillor Condacor mentioned people who've been couch surfing, struggling to pay council tax, things like that. I can speak from personal experience that that is a real issue in Nuneaton, and the advice rights are the first port of call for getting out of that kind of trouble. I'm not sure from the responses that I've received from the councillors I've spoken to, you fully understand what a widespread problem this is in Nuneaton, particularly in the 0 hours contract industry, but I know a great many people who've worked on 0 hour contract jobs who struggle to get paid for the work they've already done. They're lied to about the kind of work they're going to get. It's difficult because you have to prove that you work the shifts you've already worked. The onus is on you. And again, there's just no way of knowing where to start without the kind of help that advice rights provide us. In my opinion, there's no point blaming this on the Tories. The people who oppose the Tories already know that the Tories provide austerity and make massive cuts to everything. Labour gets the support it gets because people expect it to provide for the poor, to represent the interests of the working class. When you make that your platform, but you're still opposing cuts to things like the cricket club, which is what, £479,830, or the skate park, which is £84,000. The Poundland deal was about £250,000. There's a netball court going up for £50,000. When you don't want to cut these things and you're happier to cut things like advice rights, I think that speaks very poorly for your own rhetoric. So there's national research done independently by the I can't remember the institution, but it endorses the CAB's findings that their services, which include advice rights, recoup what they cost about 20 times over. So this isn't, to me, just a betrayal of the working class. It's bad economics. It's going to cost your council quite a lot more money. A lot more is going to be coming out of your own budget in the coming years if there's no advice rights service. And I do think it would be a shame if the council harvests his legacy after 31 years on the council. Thank you.
I was going to ask any questions. Larry Goss.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I attended the Economic and Corporate OSP meeting on February the 8th, where the Council Office presented an excellent overview of the voluntary and community sector activities for quarters 1 and 2. This included the Warwickshire Employment Rights Services, local people and employment issues covering unlawful deductions, discrimination, grievances, redundancies, etc. In terms of performance, they smashed their contact target of 1,216 with a return of 1,685, providing assistance to residents of 17 of our wards. Of these, 50% who made contact were from 5 of our most deprived wards, which, by the way, are also in the top 10% nationally. These wards' number of contacts are as follows: Camphill 327, Wenbrook 189, Abbey 148, Barpool 131, and Kingswood 51. So what a fantastic result for the Council and the Employment Rights Service in providing this essential support where it's most needed. However, as ever, there's a sting in the tail, as you well know, because this Cabinet's proposing to withdraw all funding for the Employment Rights Service, which just makes no sense at all. The meeting last week, this proposal was challenged at length by the minority parties, as well as a member of the public who made an impassioned plea for this decision to be reversed at this Cabinet meeting. Unfortunately, a vote taken on a motion to put counter proposals to the Cabinet, which was only ever going to go one way, prevented this. Of course, this decision has nothing to do with this Cabinet, does it? You have no choice because of government cutbacks. It's someone else's fault, as usual. Well, it really is a deja vu moment for me, because here we are again, just like the shouted housing cutbacks 15 months ago, where this Labour leader in his Cabinet choosing to use the most deprived people in our borough, in fact, the most deprived in his own ward, as a political football in this national politics game. You make it hurt with maximum impact so you can put the blame on the government's doorstep with scant regard for the most vulnerable people in the borough. I did speak at a cabinet meeting at the time on the sheltered housing and stated that we, the residents, are not prepared to put up with the way this council operates, and I can assure you nothing's changed. Nothing has changed at all. Also, there's a simple answer in this case, and it's just been said, you know, just ditch your In Touch magazine. Few people see it. Some people do, some people don't. Probably most people see it just before the election, as you would expect. But this would save £36,000, which can be used to sustain the advice rights activity. Will the council leader listen? Thank you.
Any questions to Mr Goss?
Yes, Mr Goss, are you aware that the reduction in monies, the complete withdrawal of monies for sheltered housing was made by Warwickshire County Council and actually have nothing to do with this council?
I am aware, yes, yeah. Yeah, the problem sits in this room. It's no good blaming the people. I am well aware, yes.
Thank you, Mr Goss. Mr Bannister?
Firstly, Councillor, I mean, I would say this, I've been heartened by the support in a very short space of time that's been demonstrated since we had the announcement of the cancellation of our funding. And many of the things that have been said both in the Economic Overview and Scrutiny Committee and here today and will be said elsewhere, I'm very heartened because the service has been active in Nuneaton for over 30 years. It was created by a group of trade unionists and socialists, many of whom are known to members of the ruling Labour group. And we've taken that service on from very small beginnings to be a well-recognised service that does an excellent job in helping the most vulnerable people in Nuneaton and Bedworth. I don't think that you would be cancelling 100% of our funding if you carried out the proper consultation exercises. Cuts to funding, as we've heard, have to be made. I don't argue with that. You could have spread them across the 3 organisations that you fund. That's what's happened in previous years. But it didn't happen this year. But again, because there's been no consultation, because there are no reports, because there is no transparency, we've absolutely no idea what occurred in the thinking process, in the decision-making process. You could have put a 20% cut across the whole of the voluntary sector. All 3 organisations would still be standing and they would be all able to continue to carry out the service which they currently carry out. All of those organisations, if you look on the Charity Commission's website, you'll find that there are reserves and the amounts of money lost would not be sufficient to bring those services into threat of closure or drastic change. That is why we put forward a suggestion at this late stage, because we've been left with no other alternative, and it has to be a balanced budget as we understand it, to say to councillors, simply move an amendment to the Labour controlling group's budget, to say share the cuts as they've always been shared across the 3 organisations. They all remain standing, and if there is a desire to have a serious examination of the voluntary sector. And when I say serious, I've never seen one yet delivered by this council, and I say that, and I've been the subject of part of those investigations for many years. A serious investigation in what's best to do for the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Ask the professionals, have the debate, have an officer-led situation where we look at what we're doing, why we're doing it, what it costs, and if you want to do something else later, next year, with consideration, with proper consultation, then by all means, that's open to you. But you don't have to make this cut. You can do it in other ways. That's been pointed out by other speakers. But in particular, you can do it by the way that I've suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bannister. Any questions? Thank you very much. Councillor Kondalka.
Right, thank you, Chair. Cutting the funding for employment advice is the craziest thing this council has done, and it's done an awful lot of crazy things. I'm going to suggest tonight that we actually give them 4 months funding by actually cancelling 1 edition of In Touch, and effectively let the next administration work out how we do a long-term and sustainable system to keep all these voluntary sectors, organisations going. We need to think about this. There's been no proper meeting. The Employment Advice Service was not invited to our scrutiny meeting. We were not passed the documents that they sent in to the officers. This needs a review, so I'm suggesting we spend 4 months and actually let the next administration work out a long-term solution simply by cutting 1 edition of In Touch and, if necessary, having a few less pages in the next edition. £10,000 will give this organisation a lifeline for 4 months, and we can actually then try and protect the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth from unscrupulous employers. I look at the accounts, I look at all the bits the council wastes money on. I was shocked to find we're spending £6,000 a month on consultants in Mayfair to do the Abbey Street regeneration project. And then I find they don't even live in Mayfair or work in Mayfair. That was just one of these virtual offices they do. There is such an issue with the council giving money to rich people whilst keeping the borough poor. And my theory is you lot are trying to keep the borough poor to make sure people vote Labour. Well, unfortunately, people are working out.
Chair, that's scandalous. That's absolutely
Can I
scandalous
ask
that
you
you can
not
say
to-
something like that. That has been raised nationally, and that is absolutely appalling.
Councillor, can you just...
Absolutely
Can I
appalling.
ask you not to
Well, this
use
is theory or
abusive
not?
terms like you
Disgusting.
lot?
We have to...
I hope, always treated you with the proper respect, and I've treated other people with the proper respect. I think people are getting a little tired of abuse and calling people you lot.
To understand why you are cutting funding for advice services and giving money to people in expensive consultancies trying to sell the Abbey Street venture is a legitimate question. To ask why we're spending £42 for every child to climb a climbing wall when it costs us probably £20 to give someone employment advice. We need to look at how much each thing costs us and what benefit we get from it. And there's a whole lot of things we do. An In Touch magazine, a climbing wall. There's so many stupid things this council does. And if we look at the cost of providing per thing this service, giving people employment advice at 10 or 20 or whatever the amount is per person is a very, very good use of funding. And giving money to a climbing wall is very bad use. In this committee room, my wife Michelle came and told you not to invest in the climbing wall. Before you even started, we need to think, we need to have the scrutiny and the debate about, is this a good thing to do? Is it good to cut this? Is it good to spend money on this? The lottery, it might be a good idea, it might be a bad idea, but we do not do enough thinking in this council. We have schemes that get dreamt up, get pushed forward, cost us money, climbing wall classic example, cuts, and it's just madness. And now we're going to close the toilets in Nuneaton and Bedworth.
Thank you, Councillor Kondaka. Are there any questions to Councillor Kondaka? Bearing in mind the Cabinet can actually speak about this report after the question session. Are there any questions to Councillor Kondaka? No? Thank you very much. Michelle Kondaka.
Thank you. There were quite a number of things that came up from looking through this budget and things. And the one thing I would ask before I even mention anything in the budget is that next year, whoever is in charge, please can we have a budget process that has true openness and transparency. We get presented things. I've got 101 questions I would like to ask. As a member of the
Can I
public...
just stop you, Mrs Kondaka? At the Cabinet, you can only make a statement, not ask questions.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
You just said you've 100 questions
Yes,
to ask.
there are 101 questions I would like to ask about these things, and there is never, ever an opportunity to. At full council, I can ask one question. My question that I put in last time had 2 parts, and it was rejected because of that. All of a sudden, not enough notice that I could resubmit it. There is never any opportunity for us to question things. So, yes, I can put rhetorical questions in here. I asked a question about the housing earlier, and I don't get an answer. And, the whole system thing. There are a lot of people in the borough that have a huge amount of experience in business, in all fields of work. They would love to take part in things. The externalised operation of the climbing tower. Anyone with any business sense would say, it was a mistake. Get rid of it. Be done with it. Things. But there's never any discussion. The Civic Hall Bistro, goes to a coffee shop with limited food offering. Why is that not put out to tender? The same as the museum cafe and things. From all I can see is that it's got good footfall and things. So it could be a good business. It doesn't need to be run by the council. I'm concerned about savings across ground maintenance. You know, we've already got problems. Reduce unnecessary paper correspondence to councillors. Excellent idea. So then why do you sort of try and tell my husband off in a way that he has to pick everything up by paper because you won't email it to him? It's all just ridiculousness. Delete trade unions. Reduce, delete part-time antisocial behaviour role. I want to know, what does that leave? Does that still leave? How many antisocial behaviour officers have we got? These are all questions that really need to be asked and the public to understand and know what the answers are. It's not easy to balance a budget. I understand that and things, but we need to actually have a two-way conversation, and we just never get that. So what other things did I pick out from here? Cemetery income 3.2 on page 47. Income from cemetery fees and sports pitches have been below the approved budget for much of the year. So people aren't using the sports pitches. You're supposed to be promoting health and well-being. Get rid of the climbing wall that's helping a handful of people and lower the cost for the sports pitches so that more people can use them. They're just simple
Thank you very much, Mrs.
things.
Kondarka. Are there any questions to Mrs. Kondarka? Thank you. Right, we have the general fund budget and capital programme in front of us. I would yet again point out, despite some people seeming to think that money grows on trees or it happens magically, that people have the chance to speak properly at the committee. I don't interrupt them, and I would hope they'd interrupt me.
Sorry,
The problems of this council financially are caused by our MPs, our 3 local MPs, voting along with their Conservative colleagues to reduce massively the grant to Nuneaton and Bedworth. The grant to Nuneaton and Bedworth has been reduced to such an extent we are now trying to operate on less than 40% of what we used to have, and yet we have managed to maintain our services. Very few councils can actually say that. I will talk about that a little bit later when we come to the budget debate, assuming people are not shouting. But I would like to move what we have left of the budget. This year we've actually tried to do things as we go along, and we've acceded to requests to be more open and discuss these earlier and so on. Of course, as a result, more abuse from people who believe that somehow this council, despite the massive cuts from government, can continue to operate to the same level as it previously did. I wouldn't mind if some of those very same people were not going along to the county council, voting massive cuts to welfare and social budgets at the county, and then coming here and telling us we can manage on Tuppence halfpenny. But I've got the recommendations I want to put forward for the remaining gap, and I would like to thank the hard work that's gone into looking by all our officers and members during the year as to how we can save as many of our services as possible, and in particular the services that we are responsible for. Many of these services are services of others, and we are very generous in terms of the overall grant situation we make in this borough, but it is not our sole responsibility. So, I'm going to move that the General Fund Draft Budget 2018, attached as Appendix B, be recommended to the Council for approval. Yes, please, yeah. We've got copies of it, so you'll have the Labour budget before you get anything else's. So we have a gap of 287,000 still to make, in spite of having made many changes already. So the first change we're going to make is that we're going to change the future operation of the CCTV service and reduce the funding on that, which is massive funding, by 23,000. And we have already had talks with the police commissioner, looking for the police commissioner to make up that shortfall, as this of course is very largely a police responsibility. If that is taken up by the police commissioner, as may well be the case, it looks like that will still continue to provide the service that we do now. We're going to reduce the cabinet by 1 member to take effect from annual council in May 2018 at a saving of 7,000. A lot less, of course, than it would be for a Conservative cabinet member at Warwick, were there to reduce one. Thirdly, reducing the number of overview and scrutiny panels from 4 to 2 with effect from annual council in May 2018, which will save us 9,000 in allowances. We wish to reduce the special responsibility allowance for the chair of the licensing committee, in fact halving it, which will save 2,000. We're looking at small increases in many of the fees and charges. Others will go up more, and they will still be below relevant authorities nearby. So we're looking at a 3.9% increase in environmental health fees, in line with RPI, excluding those for dealing with stray dogs. A 2% increase in pest control fees, 3.1% increase in building control fees, and as agreed by the Building Control Steering Group. At the Civic Hall bar, a 5p increase on each drink. At Civic Hall shows, an increase in private hire charges by 3.9%, in line with RPI, and a 3% increase in ticket prices for council promoted shows. Sports pictures, a 10% increase across all fees to bring closer to be in line with other authorities in the area. This should generate an additional income of £13,000 in total. So this would bring us in 54,000. I might add, we are not looking yet again to increase market rents or parking charges, which have remained static for some years now, both. B, that the District Council tax for 2018-19 be increased by 2.99% on a Band D property, taking it to £226.88, which will raise £245,000 in additional council tax income. C, that the surplus resources of 12,000 be added to the general fund balances to support the savings programme in future years. And that the Director of Finance and Procurement assurance statements on reserves and base budgets proposals as included in Appendix A be noted. Because of the timescales involved, the general fund revenue budget 2018-19 was considered as an urgent item and not subject to calling as provided for in paragraph 15, brackets F of the Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rules in Part 4 of the Constitution. So I so move that. Is that seconded? Remember? All those in favour of that then? That's unanimous from the Cabinet. That will of course go to full council. Then we come to item 9, which is the Treasury Management Strategy. This report sets out the Council's strategy for borrowing and investing resources during 2018-19 and through to 2021. All the Treasury and prudential indicators requiring approval are detailed within the report, but are summarised at Appendix B. These help to ensure that our capital spend is affordable and prudent. The report includes forecasts for interest rates and future capital spend and details the impact that these have on the borrowing and investments for this Council. The Council's investment policy, our strategy and our counterparty creditworthiness policy, which details the methodology for selecting suitable investment counterparties, are detailed in sections 11 through to 13. The Council is required to have a policy for minimum revenue provision for debt repayment, and this is explained at Appendix A. The recommendation at 2.1 is for Cabinet to agree the proposed Treasury strategy and budgetary framework for 2018-19 as detailed in the Appendix G and submit to Council for approval. And due to the timescales involved, the report is marked not for calling. There is one speaker down to speak on this, Councillor Condotta.
Thank you. Treasury management is always a difficult thing, and this council has an incredibly fine and really well-educated officer doing this, and whatever I say, people say I'm not qualified. But I think our officers are doing a marvellous job of treasury management now. We have had the time in the past when we had the Icelandic bank losses, and we're now incredibly careful with our treasury management. What I do want to comment on, though, is how difficult it is to manage our treasury if we don't know what's happening to our income and our expenditure. The treasury management function will borrow money based upon what we're expected to do in the next year. And if we don't do the refurbishment of homes, if we don't buy vehicles when we're expecting them, if the council itself is running behind those capital projects, which it does all the time and to millions, it mucks up how much money we borrow if we're not careful. Likewise, if we buy assets, those effectively then become loans. So treasury management is a key part of running a business, and actually it needs to be supported by having accurate forecasts of how much stuff costs. And then we come back to things like the depot, where someone forecast it to be 600,000 and it ends up being 2 million. We need to be more honest about where we're going, and also more honest about what's happening to our capital sales. We have the building behind you, we have the St Mary's Road depot. All these things are just trundling along. No one's got any idea, apart from the annual announcement they're being sold again, there's any progress on it. So we should actually do a better job of integrating treasury management and forecasting if, or if not, our projects will happen next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I ask you a question first of all? You repeated twice, you said we need to be more honest. Are you implying that any people in this building are dishonest?
I'm implying that we keep saying we've sold a building like the council house and it keeps ending up being not sold. So the news we get out is not dishonest or as much as selective. So we get good news, we don't get the bad news that the deal's fallen through.
So are you saying, quite simply, yes or no, that people are honest or dishonest?
It depends who. I believe the officers are honest.
That implies the councillors are not.
All councillors are on take that.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
All councillors.
Right, we have in fact before us the Treasury Management Strategy and Budgetary Framework, which of course is a good report. This council has always had excellent treasury management and excellent management of the budget. It has regularly had good district auditors' reports when it was a district auditor, and now external auditors' reports. We have actually never had a majorly critical auditor's report, ever, in 44 years. That cannot be said in many councils. So, I put the report before you. Are there any other comments before we vote on it? No? Thank you very much. Item 10, recommendations from overview and scrutiny. And item 11, any other items which are at any of those. Thank you very much.